I always thought peace came easy out here. You wake up to the smell of hay, the sound of crickets fatting with the dawn, and the sun cutting through the mist like a slow promise. My name, Holt Travis. I own a small farm, been in my family 4 generations. Nothing fancy, just honest ground that's fed more sweat than it's seen rain some years. My great-grandpa broke this soil with a mule. I use a John Deere that could probably pull his whole house if it had to. The tractor's loud, I'm not. I've always believed in one simple code. You work hard, you treat people fair, and you don't start trouble. But if trouble comes to your door, you answer it. That morning, trouble didn't knock. It parked across my driveway. It was early, about 7. The air still had that cool bite before the sun burns it off. My wife, Lisa, was in the kitchen humming soft, the sound of coffee dripping mixing with the hum of the fridge. I'd just finished greasing the baler, wiping my hands on an old rag, when she called out, "Holt, you need to see this." There was something in her tone, tight, clipped, like wire stretched too far. From the porch, I saw it, a big, white luxury SUV sitting sideways across my gravel drive. It looked too clean for this road, too proud. The kind of car that doesn't belong anywhere near mud or work. A paper flapped under its wiper, catching the morning breeze. I walked down, boots crunching over gravel, every step heavier than the last. The note was written on some kind of perfumed, fancy stationery, sharp handwriting, full of entitlement. It read, "We need to discuss the new community access point. I'll be back at noon. Don't go anywhere." Signed, Karen HOA President. I read it twice. Community access point. That's HOA talk for an easement, a shortcut through my land for the new subdivision they'd been itching to connect behind us. They'd sent letters before. I'd ignored them, thought they'd move on. I was wrong. Lisa came to stand beside me. Her eyes flicked between the SUV and my face. "She really did it," she said softly. "Yes," I muttered, "she really did." I looked at the note again. "Don't go anywhere." The arrogance in that line sat in my chest like a cold stone. I had a feed run to make in town, but she'd made sure I couldn't even leave my own property. The wind carried the smell of diesel from the barn, comforting, steady, a reminder that I still had choices. I turned to look at Old Green, my tractor, my workhorse, my answer to everything the world throws my way. Lisa must have read my thoughts. She leaned on the porch rail, mug in hand, eyes knowing. "The camera on the birdhouse still working?" she asked. "Sure is," I said. She took a slow sip, hiding a small smile. "Good, would hate for it to miss what happens next." I called the sheriff's office first. Told them someone was blocking my driveway. They said it was an HOA matter, not criminal. I hung up before my temper did the talking. By then, half the neighborhood had noticed. Neighbor Ed walked out with his coffee, standing at his fence like it was a front row seat. "You gonna tow it or plow it?" he asked, grin hiding under his mustache. "Neither," I said, wiping my hands. "I'm just taking out the trash politely." The barn doors groaned as I opened them. Dust swirled in the golden light. When I turned the key, Old Green came alive with a low growl, the kind that shakes your ribs. The smell of oil and earth filled the air. I eased her out into the yard, the ground trembling beneath those heavy tires. Neighbors started filming, phones out, whispers spreading, but I didn't care. I had a job to do. I lined the tractor up, slow and steady, forks low, right beneath the frame of that gleaming SUV. I wasn't reckless. I was careful, surgical. The metal kissed metal with a dull thunk. Someone across the street said, "He won't do it." Another replied, "Bet you $5 he will." Lisa stood on the porch, phone in hand, calm as morning dew. "Steady, Holt," she called. "Steady's all I got," I answered. The forks lifted, slow as sunrise. The front wheels of her SUV left the gravel, hanging 4 feet in the air like a dog begging for attention. The whole street went quiet. Only the groan of hydraulics filled the air. Then I rolled forward, slow, deliberate toward the drainage ditch by the road. The world seemed to hold its breath. When I eased the forks down, the SUV tipped, slid nose first, and landed in the mud with a soft whump. Farm-friendly justice. I shut the tractor off. The silence afterward was beautiful. Birds started singing again. Lisa raised her phone. "Birdhouse got it all," she said with a smirk. I glanced at the SUV. Its front buried, tail sticking up like a surrender flag. Problem solved, or so I thought. Because sometimes, when you push back against power, it doesn't retreat. It reloads. And what I didn't know that morning, standing there proud and muddy, was that this wasn't the end of a feud. It was the opening shot of a war. By sunset that same day, I thought it was over. The SUV was half submerged in the ditch, Karen hadn't shown up, and the only sound around the farm was the low hum of crickets starting their night chorus. I poured myself a cup of coffee, leaned against the porch rail, and thought maybe, just maybe, the message had landed. But the internet had other plans. Neighbor Eid, bless his heart, had one of those dash cameras always running in his truck. He'd caught the whole thing, the tractor, the lift, the slow roll into the ditch, even the moment Lisa said, "Birdhouse got it all." His son uploaded it that afternoon with the title, "Farmer vs. HOA President, Tractor Justice." By dinner, it had a few thousand views. By morning, a few million. Lisa read the comments while making breakfast, the scent of frying eggs filling the kitchen. "Listen to this one," she laughed, scrolling. "That's not a tractor, that's a justice delivery system." Another one said, "He didn't even scratch it. Clean lift, cleaner karma." I smiled, but it was the kind of smile you wear when you know a storm's still sitting just over the horizon. Because I've been around bullies all my life, and I know one thing, they don't just walk away when they're embarrassed. They plan, they get quiet, and then they hit you where you can't see it coming. 2 days later, a letter came, thick envelope, fancy paper, smelled faintly like perfume and power. Lisa opened it with her letter opener while I finished patching a fence. When I walked in, she was standing at the counter, arms crossed, reading in silence. Her lips pressed together the way they do when she's trying not to curse. "Well," I asked. She looked up, voice flat. "You better sit down." It wasn't just one fine, it was 3. $500 for unauthorized operation of agricultural machinery on a residential access road. My driveway. $1,000 for unapproved modification of community landscape. Apparently, her SUV's tire tracks counted as landscape. And the best one, $2,000 for creating a public nuisance and safety hazard. Lisa pointed at the last line. They cited the viral video as evidence. I took the letter, read it twice, and felt my blood run hot. She can't be serious. Oh, she's serious, Lisa said, already at her laptop. These bylaws are written like a magician's trick, vague enough to let her pull whatever she wants out of a hat. Look here. She turned the screen toward me. Section 4. Any action deemed detrimental to the aesthetic harmony of the community. That's a blank check. Aesthetic harmony. My 100-year-old driveway had apparently violated their harmony. The next day, Karen showed up. I saw her long before I heard her, heels crunching gravel like she was auditioning for a villain role she didn't know she already had. She strutted down my drive, letter in hand, that fake sweet smile stretched tight. "Sign the survey permission, Holt," she said, "or the county will do it for you." I folded my arms. "You practicing law without a license now?" She tilted her head. "I practice winning. People like you fold, I just pick the crease." Lisa stepped onto the porch, holding her phone, camera light blinking red. Karen turned toward it, unbothered. "Film this," she said coldly. "This is the day he learns who runs Briarwood." I smiled. The cows run Briarwood. Something in her mask cracked. Her lips twitched, the smile dying in her throat. She leaned closer. "You'll wish you sold cheap." She turned and walked off, her perfume lingering like poison. That night, another letter came. Not a fine this time, something worse. a formal demand for land access for public safety and emergency services. She was setting the stage. The easement she wanted, the road through my pasture, was about to be justified by fake emergencies and doctored reports. The emails followed next. They came from her official HOA address, all signed Best, Karen Tyson. The first one was civil, patronizing even. Mr. Travis, I'm willing to be the bigger person here. If you agree to a meeting about the easement, I might reconsider these fines. I didn't respond. And hours later, another ping. Your lack of response is being noted. Cooperation would be in your best interest. By midnight, they turned ugly. You're lowering property values. Your tractor is a safety hazard. I can make this much worse for you. The last one came with an attached photo, a blurry shot of my barn. The subject line read, "Lovely old structure. Would be a shame if it failed inspection." Lisa printed every single one, hole-punched them, and slid them into a folder she labeled in black Sharpie, Karen. For a moment, we just sat there, side by side at the kitchen table. The clock ticked loud in the silence. Outside, the wind picked up, shaking the old oak by the porch. I can wait for a seed to grow, I said quietly. I can wait for a storm to pass. But this... Lisa looked up, her eyes were hard, determined. Then we stopped waiting. I nodded slowly. The time for patience was over. That night, I stood out on the porch and looked across the dark fields. The same land my great-grandfather plowed. My father bled on. My wife now protected beside me. The sky was ink black, stars buried behind a low ceiling of cloud. But in that silence, I could feel something shift, like the ground itself was holding its breath. I thought about her SUV, sitting nose first in the ditch, and realized something chilling. That was never about the driveway, it was bait, a test. She wanted me to react, to give her a story she could twist, paperwork she could weaponize. And I'd done exactly that. The war wasn't coming, it had already started. And the next attack, I knew deep down, wouldn't come in daylight or with fancy letters. It would come quiet. In the kind of darkness that makes you wish you locked every gate twice. It started with silence. Not the peaceful kind that wraps a farm at night, but the kind that wakes you up from a dead sleep, because something that should be there is. It was around 3 in the morning. The air was cool, damp, heavy with dew. I sat up in bed, my chest tight with that old farmer's instinct that knows when the world's off balance. Lisa stirred beside me. "What is it?" she whispered. "I don't know," I said. "Something's wrong." Out here, you learn the rhythm of sound, the low hum of the diesel tank pump, the wind pushing through the corn rows, the distant creak of the barn door. That night, the pump was silent. I grabbed my boots and the heavy maglite by the door. The floorboards creaked as I stepped outside. The moon was gone behind clouds, the night thick and wet. Each breath came out in a puff of mist. When I rounded the barn, the beam of my flashlight hit the ground and my stomach dropped. The hose from the big diesel tank was lying in the dirt, coiled like a dead snake. A dark stain spread beneath it, glistening wet. The padlock on the valve was gone, snapped clean. I checked the gauge, empty. All 500 gallons, gone. I stood there, the smell of fuel heavy in my nose, the cold seeping through my shirt. Someone had drained my livelihood right out of me. That wasn't vandalism, that was war. A calm anger settled over me, not the kind that burns fast, but the kind that freezes. I swept the flashlight across the ground and found what I was looking for, a single bootprint in the mud. Not mine. Smaller, cheaper. The heel had a star pattern. I took a picture, evidence. Lisa was already up when I got back to the house. She met me at the door, eyes wide, robe pulled tight. I didn't need to speak. She saw the look on my face. "They drained the tank," I said. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Holt, we have to call the sheriff." And say what? Someone stole my fuel, I shook my head. They'll file a report then forget it. There's no proof who did it. But deep down I already knew. Morning came gray and heavy. I went to let the cattle out, hopping routine would steady me. When I reached the back pasture, my heart sank again. The gate wasn't open, it was cut. 3 clean snips through heavy gauge wire, right by the post. The gate hung by one hinge like a broken arm, and beyond it, nothing. My herd, 26 head of cattle, were gone. For a second my mind just went blank. Then panic hit, cold and sharp. Those cattle were everything, months of feed, labor, care, and now they were wandering somewhere in the dark, maybe on the main road. I called Eid first, then Sharon, then Mark from down the road. By dawn, half the old farmers in the county were out with their trucks and flashlights, combing the back roads. We found them, some grazing in a neighbor's alfalfa field, a few more down near the highway shoulder, confused and lowing. The rest were clustered by the fence line, muddy, scared, but safe. It took us 2 hours to get them back through the broken gate. When the last one crossed, I fixed the wire with shaking hands. My arms were sore, my clothes caked in mud, but the ache in my chest was worse. They could have just opened the gate. But no, they cut it, precise, intentional. They wanted to make it look like I was careless, like my animals had escaped because I was negligent. It wasn't random, it was a message. I can touch you, I can hurt you, I can ruin what you love. Lisa met me halfway back to the house, camera in hand. She'd been documenting everything, the snapped lock, the cut wire, the boot print. She's building a case, Lisa said, her voice tight. She wants to paint you as a reckless farmer, a hazard to the community, dangerous tractor, loose cattle, unsafe fuel storage. It all fits her narrative for that easement. I sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window at the field my grandfather once called his church. The anger drained out of me, leaving something harder, heavier. She picked the wrong man to push. I looked at Lisa. She wants a war, fine, but from now on we fight on our terms. Her eyes softened. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time we set a trap. That night, the kitchen table turned into our war room. Lisa spread out a satellite map of our property, 160 acres of patchwork fields and fence lines, the farmhouse tucked near the road like a heart in the middle of veins. I traced the property line with a calloused finger. They've hit the tanks and the gate. They'll hit them again. People like her, they repeat patterns. We just need to be ready. Lisa nodded, already scribbling notes. Then we control the field. We make them come to our spot, where we can see every move they make. We didn't sleep much that night. By morning, I had a plan and a list. It wasn't feed or fencing this time. It was surveillance gear, cameras, trackers, ultraviolet dye. Things no ordinary farmer should need just to defend his own land. In town, the clerk at the electronics shop gave me a look when I bought 4 motion-activated cameras and a small UV flashlight. You hunting raccoons or ghosts? He joked. Just varmints, I said, half smiling. The truth was uglier than any animal story. That evening, I spent hours in the workshop rigging up the cameras inside old wooden birdhouses. Small holes drilled just below the perch, perfect for the lens. Each had its own battery pack and wireless transmitter linked straight to Lisa's tablet. By sundown, we placed them. One overlooking the driveway, another near the barn and fuel tanks, a third by the back fence where the gate was cut, and the last on the big oak tree watching the pasture. I hid 2 GPS trackers, one inside the tractor's engine compartment, another under the trailer frame. If anyone tried to steal my equipment, I'd know exactly where it went. The final piece of the plan was bait. We still had a smaller 55-gallon drum of diesel, the one we used for the utility gator. I filled it to the brim, then poured in a full bottle of that UV dye. Under normal light, it looked ordinary. But under the blacklight, it glowed electric blue, bright enough to mark anyone who touched it. I loosened the cap slightly, snapped on a cheap lock that could break easy, and left it sitting by the barn. An open invitation. When I stepped back and looked at the setup, a strange calm settled over me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't scared. I was ready. Lisa stood beside me, her hand finding mine. "You sure about this?" she asked softly. "I'm sure," I said. She wanted to play dirty. Let's see how she handles clean evidence. That night, the farm slept under a thin blanket of fog. From the porch, I could see the glow of the barn light, hear the faint hum of crickets, feel the steady weight of purpose in my chest. For the first time since this all began, I wasn't reacting. I was waiting. And when people like Karen stop seeing your patience as weakness, that's when they make their last mistake. Waiting was the hardest part. Days passed like slow rain, soft, steady, soaking everything in unease. Lisa and I went through the motions, pretending life was normal, but our eyes were always drawn to that tablet on the kitchen table. The live feed from the birdhouse cameras flickered quietly through the nights, black and white images of still barns, waving grass, the occasional deer crossing the frame. The first night, nothing. The second, a fox tripped one of the sensors, and Lisa nearly spilled her coffee. By the third night, I began to wonder if I'd overthought it, if maybe they'd done their damage and were gone. But Lisa didn't think so. "They're waiting for you to drop your guard," she said. "That's what bullies do. They come back when you start to breathe again." She was right. It was just after midnight on the fourth night when the tablet chimed, a sharp little alert that sliced through the stillness. The barn camera. Lisa's hand trembled as she tapped the screen. The night vision image popped up, grainy but clear enough. A lone figure moved through the fog toward the smaller fuel drum I'd filled with that ultraviolet dye. Hoodie, gloves, bolt cutters glinting in the moonlight. "Gotcha," I whispered. He knelt down, snapped the cheap padlock, and started feeding a siphon hose into the drum. The faint glug of fuel filled the quiet as he lined up a row of plastic cans in the back of a beat-up pickup truck. Every sound made my pulse thrum in my ears. Lisa looked at me. "Do we call the sheriff?" "Not yet." I grabbed my maglite and the small UV flashlight from the table. "This one's mine." I stepped out into the dark. The grass was slick with dew, the air thick with the smell of rain that hadn't fallen yet. I moved slow, circling wide around the barn. The hum of the siphon got louder. When I was close enough to hear him mutter under his breath, I switched on the big light. The beam hit him square in the face. He yelped, stumbling back, hands raised to shield his eyes. "Looking for something," I said, voice low. He was thin, wiry, maybe mid-40s. Cheap jacket, work boots, cheap ones too. The kind with that same star pattern I'd seen in the mud days earlier. "I wasn't doing anything," he stammered. "Just leaving." "Leaving with 30 gallons of my diesel." I took a step closer. "That's an interesting kind of errand." He darted left, tried to make a break for the truck. I blocked him easily. My body knew this ground better than his feet ever could. "Keys," I said, holding out my hand. "Now." He hesitated, then tried to push past me. Big mistake. I caught his jacket, turned him, and pressed him back against the barn wall. "I don't need to prove you're stupid," I said quietly. "I just need to prove who sent you." His eyes flicked toward the road, like a dog glancing toward a master who wasn't there. That told me everything. I reached into my pocket, switched off the maglite, and clicked on the smaller UV beam. The darkness filled with an eerie blue glow. His hands lit up like ghost fire. So did the cuffs of his jacket, the hose, the spilled diesel around his boots. He froze, staring down at himself in shock. "You ever seen justice glow before?" I asked. "I call it Smurf justice." He didn't run. He couldn't. The fear in his eyes wasn't for me, it was for whoever had sent him. "It wasn't my idea," he gasped finally. "I swear it wasn't my idea." "Then whose was it?" She paid me, he blurted. She made me do it. I held his gaze. Say her name. Karen Tyson. There it was, spoken out loud. The rage I'd been holding in broke through for a moment, but I kept it leashed. I wasn't going to scare him off now that I had him. I led him inside the barn, sat him down on an old wooden crate. He kept staring at his glowing hands like they were cursed. Lisa came in a moment later, quiet as always. She didn't speak. She just set her phone on the workbench and hit record. The red light blinked. Start talking, I said, all of it. And he did. His name was Jerry. He'd been working handyman jobs around the neighborhood, barely scraping by. Karen had hired him first to fix a broken fence at her property. Then, a few weeks ago, she'd offered him cash for something off the books. He drained my tank. He cut the fence. He was the one who scattered my cattle and stole my fuel. And he'd done it all for $500 a job. She said you were some stubborn old farmer holding up progress, he said, voice cracking. Said if we made your life hard enough, you'd sell the easement for cheap just to make it stop. Lisa crossed her arms, eyes burning. Progress, she repeated quietly. That's what she called it. Jerry nodded miserably. She said she was working with some development company, Oak Ridge Estates, I think. Said they'd pay her big if she secured the road. I leaned against the workbench, the smell of oil and hay thick around us. So the HOA was her cover, I said slowly. All the fines, the letters, the intimidation, it was never about rules, it was about money. Lisa took a deep breath, picked up a pen, and slid a piece of paper toward him. Write it down, she said. Everything you just told us. Every word. You sign it and we'll tell the sheriff you cooperated. If you do, she gestured toward the phone, still recording. Then we hand this video over and let the law deal with you. He didn't argue. He wrote fast, every word spilling out like confession. When he signed it, his hands trembled. I rolled his truck into the equipment bay, locked it in with a chain. Evidence, I said. He could walk home, he didn't protest. When he was gone, Lisa and I stood in the barn doorway, watching the mist settle over the fields. The adrenaline finally wore off, leaving only the weight of what we now knew. We had his statement. We had the video. We had proof that Karen wasn't just petty, she was criminal. But even with all that, I knew it wasn't over, not by a long shot. A signed confession from a thief against a well-connected HOA president. She'd bury it under lawyers and paperwork before sunrise. Lisa sat down at her computer that night, determination lighting her face. We need more, she said. We need a paper trail, something that ties her directly to that developer. I nodded, then let's dig. Outside, the barn light buzzed softly, throwing long shadows across the wet ground where the fight had happened. Somewhere out there in the dark, Karen Tyson still believed she was untouchable. And she didn't know yet that her empire of paper and lies was about to burn. Sleep didn't visit our house that night. Lisa's desk lamp glowed till dawn, painting her in a halo of tired determination. I watched from the doorway, coffee cooling in my hand. Her eyes darted across the screen, fingers flying over the keyboard. I've seen her focused before, balancing farm books, planning harvests, but never like this. This was war. We already had Jerry's confession, the glowing evidence, the stolen fuel, the cut fences. But we both knew it wasn't enough. Karen was powerful, connected. The HOA board bent to her will like grass to the wind. A thief's signature wouldn't topple her. Lisa spoke without looking up. She'll claim Jerry's lying to save himself. She'll say you paid him to frame her. She could say the sky's green. Someone would believe it, I muttered. She kept scrolling. That's why we need more. A paper trail. Something that connects her directly to that developer, Oak Ridge Estates. Hours passed in quiet intensity. The only sounds were the soft click of keys, the occasional sigh, and the low hum of the fridge. Every so often I'd refill her mug, the rich smell of coffee mixing with the storm smell that seeped through the window cracks, that metallic taste in the air that says lightning isn't far away. Around 2 in the morning, Lisa froze. "Wait," she whispered. I stepped closer. "What is it?" She pointed at her screen. "The HOA's meeting minutes. Look, it says there was a special board meeting 3 weeks ago where they voted to authorize legal action against us." I frowned. "That's impossible. Eats on the board, he would have told us." "Exactly," she said, already opening another tab. "The last real meeting was 2 months ago. I checked the county notice board." She zoomed in on the document. It looked official, logos, signatures, even the HOA watermark. But the wording, it was too clean, too polished. It read like a lawyer wrote it after the fact. "She faked it," Lisa said. "Karen falsified HOA records to give herself the authority to sue us." I felt a cold satisfaction bloom in my chest. Finally, a crack. But Lisa wasn't done. Her mind moved like a hawk, scanning for movement, locking onto every detail. She cross-referenced the HOA filings with county land records, tracing property lines, permit requests, and development proposals. The map on her screen looked like a spiderweb, each thread leading somewhere deeper. Then she found it, the company behind Oak Ridge Estates. A shell corporation, no physical address, registered in another state, designed to hide whoever was pulling the strings. "Every dirty deal has a weak link," Lisa murmured, half to herself. "They can bury their name, but they can't hide the paperwork." She clicked through public filings until one tiny detail flashed across the screen, a name. "Karen Miller." "Who's that?" I asked. Lisa didn't answer right away. She opened another browser tab, typing faster now, eyes narrowing. A few clicks later, she turned the screen toward me. There it was, an old newspaper clipping. A wedding announcement from 20 years ago. Bride's name, Karen Miller. Groom's name, Thomas Tyson. My jaw tightened. She used her maiden name. Lisa nodded grimly. She registered the developer under her old name. She's the owner, the HOA president and the developer both her. It hit me like a punch. The fines, the threats, the sabotage, all of it had been part of her own land grab. She wasn't protecting the community. She was the predator. I sat down beside Lisa, the adrenaline fatting into something heavier. "We've got her, Lise. We've got her dead to rights." She didn't look triumphant, just tired, wary. "We have to be smart. She's dangerous. If she suspects we know, she'll lash out." I rubbed my face. "Then we get ahead of her." But we didn't. By the time dawn broke, the clouds outside had gone from gray to charcoal. The wind picked up, carrying that restless whistle through the trees. The storm was building, and not just in the sky. The next night it came. Thunder rolled across the fields like distant artillery. The lights flickered once, twice, then died. Lisa lit oil lamps, the soft flame turning her face to gold and shadow. "Power out," she said quietly. "Storm must have hit the main line," I replied, though my gut said different. Then her phone chimed. Not a message, a motion alert. Lisa snatched it up, her fingers trembling. "The oak tree camera," she whispered. "Far end of the property." We huddled over the small screen. The feed was grainy through the rain, lightning flashing like camera shutters across the field. A truck. The same one Jerry had driven. Its headlights cut through the downpour as it stopped by the main gate. 2 figures climbed out. One carried a heavy chain. The other stayed behind the wheel, revving the engine. "They're going to pull the gate down," Lisa breathed. "They're not after the gate," I said slowly. "They're after evidence. Jerry's truck, the recordings." Lisa's fingers danced across her phone. "I'm calling the sheriff." She tried once, twice, 3 times. The signal icon blinked, then vanished. "Line dead," she said. "Tower must be down." The rain beat harder on the roof, each drop a drumbeat in my chest. I stood, grabbed my jacket and flashlight. Stay inside. Lock the doors. If they get past me, hit the panic horn and stay in the pantry. Halt! I mean it, Lisa. I stepped into the storm. The wind was a living thing, howling across the fields, tearing at my clothes. I could barely see 10 feet ahead, but I didn't need to. I knew this land blindfolded. I wasn't heading for the gate. I was heading for Old Green. The tractor roared to life like a beast waking up angry. Its headlights sliced through the rain, illuminating the mud-slick driveway ahead. I drove straight through the side fence, wood splintering, wire screaming, and rumbled toward the gate just as the two men hooked their chain around it. Lightning flashed, freezing everything in sharp detail. Their faces wet, mean, desperate, the truck's tires spinning in the muck. Not tonight, I muttered, gripping the wheel tight. The ground trembled as I advanced. Old Green bellowed like thunder, her massive frame unstoppable. They tried to flee. The truck fishtailed, mud spraying in wild arcs. I herded them like cattle, steady and deliberate, forcing them away from the barn, away from my house, toward the east side of the property where the ground sloped toward the pond. The driver panicked, gunned it too hard. The tires lost traction. The truck slid sideways, teetered, then went over the edge. It hit the water with a deep, heavy splash, headlights glowing like ghost eyes beneath the surface. For a moment, all I could hear was the rain. Then I saw them, two silhouettes scrambling out through the passenger window, soaked and shivering. I didn't chase them, didn't need to. Because as the storm raged on, I saw something float free from the sinking cab. Two dark shapes, burner phones. I waded in, the cold water biting through my jeans, and grabbed them before they sank. Lightning cracked overhead. For an instant, the whole world glowed white, and I realized what I was holding. A proof. When the sheriff arrived at dawn, those phones would speak louder than any confession ever could. And by the time the storm cleared, Karen Tyson's empire was already underwater. By sunrise, the storm had moved east, leaving the air thick and steaming, the earth still trembling with the memory of thunder. The pond looked like a bruise on the land, dark, swollen, quiet except for the rippling hum of frogs reclaiming their home. The truck sat half-sunk near the bank, water lapping against its rusted hood. Sheriff Daniels arrived just after 6, his cruiser crunching over wet gravel. He stepped out, heavy boots sinking into the mud, eyes scanning the scene like he'd walked into a bad dream. "Travis," he said, tipping his hat against the glare, "you've got one hell of a morning here." "Yeah," I replied, handing him a towel-wrapped bundle, 2 phones dripping pond water. "I think these might explain it." Daniels looked at them, then at me. "Please tell me you didn't pull those out yourself." I shrugged, couldn't let the truth sink. He sighed, rubbing his face. "You know, most folks would have just called it in." Most folks didn't have an HOA president sending hired thieves to sabotage their farm, I said evenly. Lisa stepped out with the folder, Jerry's written confession, photos of the glowing diesel stains, the video footage from the barn camera. She organized it all, neat as court evidence. Daniels took one look at the paperwork, and his expression shifted from skepticism to something closer to disbelief. He leaned on his cruiser door. "You're telling me Karen Tyson, HOA president, town committee darling, paid this guy to vandalize your property?" "Not just vandalize," Lisa said, "to make it look like negligence. Then she forged HOA records to justify a lawsuit and used a shell company to buy the land once we broke." Daniels whistled low. "You got proof of that?" Lisa handed him a printed copy of the corporate registration. Her maiden name, Karen Miller, owner of Oak Ridge Estates. The sheriff stared at the page a long moment before letting out a slow breath. "Well, I'll be damned." He closed the folder. "All right, you two stay put. I've got some questions to ask down at Briarwood Hall." That evening, the HOA called an emergency board meeting. It wasn't open to the public, but word travels fast in a small town, and by the time Lisa and I got there, half the neighborhood had shown up anyway. They stood outside the community center doors, murmuring in tight little clusters, phones out, eyes sharp. The hall smelled of coffee and polished wood, that sterile scent of fake civility. Karen stood at the head of the table, dressed in her usual blazer, her pearl earrings catching the light like tiny spotlights. Her smile was steady, but her eyes were different, tight, watchful, predatory. "Mr. and Mrs. Travis," she said sweetly. "You weren't invited, but I suppose it's too much to expect manners from people who roll tractors into neighbors' vehicles." The board chuckled weakly. No one laughed long. The sheriff entered behind us, hat in hand, the weight of law following him like a shadow. "Afternoon, everyone," he said. "Mind if I sit in?" Karen's smile faltered. "Sheriff, this is a private." "It's an investigation," Daniels interrupted, pulling out a chair. "And since I'm the one running it, I think we'll call it public for now." A hush fell over the room. Daniels placed the 2 sealed evidence bags on the table, each with a muddy phone inside. The light caught them just enough for everyone to see the label, "Recovered from pond near Travis property." Karen's face went pale. Daniels leaned back in his chair. "Seems we've had a busy week in Briarwood. Stolen fuel, cut fences, falsified records. You know anything about that, Mrs. Tyson?" Karen's voice came out measured, almost amused. "Sheriff, I think you're mistaken. These people have been harassing me for months with ridiculous accusations." Lisa stepped forward, holding the manila folder. "Then maybe you can explain this." She laid the documents on the table one by one: Jerry's handwritten confession, time-stamped camera footage, the UV photos, and finally, the Oak Ridge registration showing Karen Miller's name in black ink. Every paper hit like a hammer. The board members leaned in, whispering to each other. One of them, Ede, who'd always kept quiet during meetings, finally spoke up. "Karen, what is this?" Karen's smile didn't break, but her voice cracked just enough to give her away. "Fabrications, lies, anyone could have forged these." Daniels tapped the evidence bag with his pen. "These phones say otherwise. Texts, payment transfers, calls between you and a Jerry McNabb. Recognize the name." Her hand twitched on the table. That was enough. Daniels caught it like a hawk. "Ma'am," he said softly, "you've got the right to remain silent. But judging by what's on these devices, silence might be your only friend tonight." Karen stood abruptly, chair screeching backward. "This is absurd. I am the elected head of this community." "You're also the registered owner of Oak Ridge Estates," Lisa cut in. "You used your HOA position to push through your own land deal. You sabotaged our property to drive us out, and when it didn't work, you doubled down." The words echoed off the wooden walls like gunfire. Karen looked around the room, eyes darting from face to face. Every pair that had once smiled at her now looked away. The board members, the neighbors, even her so-called friends, they all took a step back as if the truth itself was contagious. Finally, she turned to me. "You think you've won, don't you?" I didn't move. "No, Karen, I just stopped losing." Daniels took her by the arm, reading her rights in that calm, weary tone small-town sheriff's perfect over decades. She tried to pull free, but her strength was gone. As he led her past us, her perfume lingered again, same as the morning she blocked my driveway. Only this time, it smelled like something burning out. Outside, the crowd parted as they stepped into the fading light. Phones went up, cameras rolled. The woman who once ruled the neighborhood with fines and threats now looked small, fragile, utterly alone. Lisa slipped her hand into mine. "It's over," she whispered. "Almost," I said, watching the sheriff's car pull away. "But storms don't clear that easy. There's still damage to fix." That night the rain returned, not the angry kind but the kind that heals. It fell soft on the tin roof, washing away the mud, the lies, the fear. I stood on the porch, watching the water trickle down the steps, thinking about how close we'd come to losing everything. Lisa came up beside me, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Feels strange, doesn't it? What does? Peace, after all this time. I took a sip, the warmth grounding me. Yeah, feels almost unnatural. She leaned her head on my shoulder. You ever think about what would have happened if we'd just sold? I nodded slowly. Every day, but I'm glad we didn't. Some ground isn't meant to be given up, it's meant to be defended. The barn light flickered in the distance, steady again. The cattle slept in their pens, the fields quiet, whole. For the first time in months, the night didn't feel like a threat. But deep down, I knew the story wasn't finished. Because people like Karen don't go quietly. They linger like shadows, waiting, watching, plotting their next way back in. And I wasn't about to let this land, or my peace, be taken again. You think once someone's hauled off in cuffs, life would finally calm down. But the thing about people like Karen Tyson, they don't vanish when the sirens fade. They haunt the edges. Their voices linger in inboxes, in whispers around town, in the long looks from neighbors who once called them ma'am. The weeks after her arrest were quiet, too quiet. The farm healed faster than I expected. The gates were repaired, the fences restrung, diesel tanks refilled. I even repainted the old barn, gave it the same deep red my grandfather used when I was a boy. But even as the land started to look alive again, I could feel the tension in the soil, like static before lightning. Lisa said it best one evening as we watched the sunset from the porch. Peace feels like waiting for something to break, she murmured. And she was right. The first crack came as a letter. No return address, just a county seal stamped in blue. Inside, a copy of a formal complaint. It accused me of agricultural runoff contamination, claiming my irrigation system was leaking chemicals into the creek behind the subdivision. The signature at the bottom was Karen's. It was from a new name, Oak Ridge Environmental Affairs, but the postmark came from the same town where Karen's lawyer had his office. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. She's using proxies now. Lisa's smile was tired. She can't come after you in person, so she'll come after your name. We drove down to the county office the next morning, proof in hand. Photos, water tests, documentation from the last inspection, all clean. The clerk, a young woman with dark circles under her eyes, looked relieved as she flipped through the file. You're not the first farmer she's gone after, she said quietly. But you're the first one who fought back and won. That's why she's not done. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the old house sounded louder. Every gust of wind through the screen door felt like footsteps on the porch. I walked outside with a flashlight, scanning the tree line. Nothing but shadows and the soft sigh of the night wind. But the sense of being watched clung to me like damp air. Lisa found me an hour later, still standing by the barn. You okay? She asked softly. I nodded, even though I was. I keep thinking about all the times she came here, all the times we smiled back, trying to keep peace. Lisa looked out over the field, her voice quiet but sharp. You were trying to protect something that mattered. She was trying to own it. There's a difference. 2 nights later, it happened again. The dog, our old shepherd mix, Rusty, started barking around 2 a.m., not his usual lazy woof. This was deep, frantic, urgent. Lisa sat up in bed instantly. Something's wrong. I grabbed the rifle I kept behind the door, not loaded, just for sound and presence, and stepped outside. The night was black, moonless. I flicked on the flashlight. At first, I saw nothing. Then, near the driveway, the beam caught something glinting in the gravel. A pile of nails. Dozens of them, scattered in a neat, deliberate arc right where the tires would roll. Lisa joined me, her robe fluttering in the wind. She's trying to make us paranoid, she said. She's succeeding, I muttered. The next morning, I called Sheriff Daniels. He came by with 2 deputies, bagged the nails, and shook his head. You've got yourself a persistent ghost, Holt, but ghosts slip up eventually. I nodded, though the weight in my chest didn't lift. That night, I sat by the porch light, waiting. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe anger, maybe something deeper. But I couldn't shake the image of her sitting somewhere in a dim room, smiling while she watched us unravel. Lisa came out quietly and sat beside me. "You can't live in the fight forever," she said. "It'll eat you." I looked at her. What if that's the price of keeping what's ours? She sighed. "Then we make sure it's worth paying." We didn't know it, but the final blow was already on its way. The next morning, a county truck rolled up the drive. The man inside wore a reflective vest and held a clipboard. "Routine inspection," he said. "Anonymous tip about unregistered heavy equipment." Lisa gave him a polite smile, but her eyes flashed. "You mean my husband's tractor?" He nodded sheepishly. "Ma'am, it's just procedure, but the tip came from the Briarwood HOA office." Lisa's patience finally cracked. "You mean the office that's under investigation, the one whose president's facing 3 felony counts?" The man hesitated. "I just follow orders." I didn't yell, didn't argue, I just led him to the barn and opened the door. "There," I said, "nothing here but hard work and memories." He did his inspection, found nothing, apologized twice, and drove off. Lisa stood there in the doorway long after he'd gone. "You know what's crazy?" she said. "She's not even free, and she's still trying to control us." I walked over, put a hand on her shoulder. "Then let's make sure she never gets the satisfaction." That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat down at my father's old desk and wrote, not reports, not complaints, a story. My story. Every detail from the first blocked driveway to the last nail in the gravel. Every lie, every fight, every small victory. Lisa read it when I was done. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. "People need to hear this," she whispered. "They need to know what she did and how far you went to protect what's right." We sent it to a local journalist, a quiet man named Darryl who'd once helped expose a corrupt zoning deal in the next county over. He read it twice, then called me that same night. "Travis," he said, "this isn't just a neighbor dispute. This is a pattern: land manipulation, forged HOA votes, intimidation. I think there's more Karens out there." I didn't want fame, didn't want revenge. I just wanted peace. But if telling my story meant protecting someone else from going through the same thing, then maybe that was my part to play. A week later, Darryl published the piece. The headline read, "HOA President's Secret Empire, How One Family Stood Their Ground." It spread fast, not like our viral video did, but deeper. It reached homeowners, small farmers, neighbors tired of being bullied by petty power. And for the first time, people didn't see me as the man with the tractor who dumped a luxury SUV into a ditch. They saw me as a man who refused to bend. That night, Lisa sat on the porch swing beside me, her head against my shoulder. "You realize what you did," she said softly. "You turned her hate into a warning for everyone else." I smiled faintly. Guess karma's got a loud engine. She laughed through her tears. "Old green strikes again." The cicadas hummed in the dark, the kind of sound that means summer, finally at peace. The land smelled of cut grass and diesel and rain, the smell of home. And though part of me knew Karen's shadow might never fully disappear, for the first time, I didn't feel watched. I felt free. The thing about peace is, it doesn't arrive all at once. It doesn't knock, it doesn't announce itself. It just sneaks in between the noise. One morning you wake up and realize you haven't clenched your jaw in weeks. The air feels lighter. The coffee tastes like coffee again. The land hums instead of moans. That's what happened here. Slowly, silently, the tension bled out of Briarwood. Karen's case made headlines across the county. Fraud, bribery, conspiracy to commit property damage. She pled no contest on advice of her lawyer, hoping to avoid prison time. The judge wasn't impressed. She got 2 years, suspended sentence, and a 10-year ban from holding any HOA position again. It wasn't the punishment that mattered, it was the silence that followed. Her voice, once the loudest in every meeting, was gone. The endless threats, the polished letters, the smug arrogance that used to fill our mailboxes, gone. For the first time, the neighborhood started breathing again. Eid took over as interim president. He's rough around the edges, but honest. His first motion was simple: dissolve half the ridiculous bylaws and return the HOA funds to community upkeep. The vote passed unanimously. Lisa and I watched from the back row that night, her hand folded in mine. The air in that hall felt different, not tense, not fake. Real, human, people smiling at each other again. Afterward, Eid came up to me. "Guess we owe you, Holt," he said, scratching his head. I shook my head. "Don't owe me anything, just promise me no more fake rules, no more fear." He nodded. "That I can do." I thought that would be the end of it. But life, it seems, always has one more thing to teach you right when you think the story over. A few weeks later, I was mending a section of fence by the north pasture when I saw a car pull up on the road, a dark sedan, dust trailing behind it. The door opened, and out stepped a man in a suit. Young, sharp, but nervous. "Mr. Travis," he called out. "Depends who's asking," I replied, wiping sweat from my brow. He walked closer, holding out an envelope. "I'm from Oak Ridge Holdings, the parent company that used to employ Mrs. Tyson. I'm here to deliver something." I frowned. I thought that company was gone. He smiled faintly. "Technically, yes, but the new board found discrepancies. They wanted to make amends." He handed me the envelope. Inside was a check, compensation for property damages, legal fees, and a written apology on official letterhead. Lisa came out from the porch just as the car drove away. "What's that?" she asked. I handed her the check. She read it, eyebrows lifting. They actually paid up. "Guess Karma finally got a lawyer," I said dryly. She laughed. "What are you gonna do with it?" I looked out across the field, the same one Karen had wanted to cut through, the same one that had cost us so many sleepless nights. The grass swayed golden in the evening wind. "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "we plant something that lasts." That fall we did. Right where the easement would have run, we built a small community garden. Rows of vegetables, herbs, wildflowers. Kids from the neighborhood helped plant, old folks came to tend. The soil, once the center of so much bitterness, became a patchwork of laughter and life. We called it the turning field. Every time I see it, I think about how things turn, how hate turns to lesson, and lesson turns to growth. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what I did that morning with the tractor. I usually smile and say, "Nope, not a thing." Because that wasn't an act of anger, it was an act of boundary. It was me saying, "This far, no further." But I also tell them this: peace doesn't come from winning fights. It comes from knowing which ones are worth fighting. Karen thought power was control. She measured respect in fear. But the truth, power's quieter than that. Real strength is the kind you don't have to prove. It's the kind that holds steady when everything around you shakes. Sometimes, I still hear the faint creak of the old gate when I walk past it, the one she blocked that first morning. It's been fixed, painted, sanded smooth. But I left one thing untouched: the hinge that still squeaks. Reminds me that even after everything's repaired, a little imperfection is how you remember what you survived. Lisa teases me about it sometimes. "You could fix that squeak in 5 minutes," she says. I smile. "Yeah, but then it'd forget." The sun sets the same way it always has, behind the line of trees where my granddad used to stand, wiping his brow after a long day's work. Some evenings, I swear I see him there, just for a heartbeat, like he's nodding, proud. This land has seen a lot. Sweat, storms, fights, peace, and now finally laughter again. The other night, Lisa sat with me on the porch, her head against my shoulder. The sky was purple gold, and the air smelled of rain and basil from the garden. "You ever think about what all this meant?" she asked softly. I took a breath, feeling the weight of the years settle easy for once. Yeah, I said. It meant that sometimes the smallest stand can echo the loudest. She smiled. Think people will remember. I nodded. They will, because stories like this don't belong to the ones who start trouble. They belong to the ones who finish it with dignity. The cicadas started up their song, long and low, like the earth humming its approval. And as I looked out over that land, our land, I finally understood something simple but true. Peace isn't when the noise stops. It's when you can finally hear yourself again. So when folks ask what really happened out here in Briarwood, about the HOA war, the SUV, the ditch, the scandal, I tell them this. I didn't flip that car out of rage. I flipped it to make room for peace. And somehow, after everything that followed, that's exactly what we found. Every HOA has a story on HOA Headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.